And it's good to see everyone. We're starting chapter 4 today in our Joshua book. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So we're in the midst of describing the crossing of the Jordan River by the people of Israel. And then so let's see, I read ahead, which I don't normally do, and it's like there's going to be a lot of time spent on the crossing, and you'll see. So let's read the first 3 verses. So we're on page 16 in the Joshua book. Vayehi ka'asher tamu kol hagoy la'avor et hayarden, vayomer Adonai el Yehoshua lemor, kechu lachem min ha'am shneim asar anashim ish echad mishabet, v'tzavu otam lemor, se'u lachem mizeh mitoch hayarden, mimatzav raglei hakohanim, Hachin 12 avanim, v'ha'avartem otam imachem, v'hinachtem otam bamalon asher talinu bo halayla. When all the people, it's just interesting. Just a note about the Hebrew. Usually the people of Israel are referred to as Ayin Mem. As a people, and other peoples are called goy, not as a derogative, as a not as a Yiddish derogative. It's just another word. Like the people of Israel are called like Am Yisrael Chai. The people of Israel live. So Am is usually referred to the people of Israel, and goy for other people. Here, the people of Israel are referred to as goy. So I don't know if that's just unique to the book of Joshua. The commentary doesn't talk about it, and Alter doesn't talk about it either. I'm just raising it as just an interesting Hebrew thing. So when all the people finished crossing the Jordan, and then there's an asterisk there, and a break in the verse. And then, as if something's missing from the sentence, which has happened before in the Torah, and probably will happen again in other books of the Bible too. We don't know why there's a space there, but now we're starting a new topic, and God spoke to Joshua saying. Now, necessarily, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's something missing. It's just that in the traditional writing of the book of Joshua, there was a space there. So the note is just telling us that there's a space. Verse 2, take from you, from the people, see the reference now changed from goy to am. So just interesting. Take from you, from the people, 12 men, 1 man for each tribe, and command them, saying, take from this, out of the Jordan, from the place where the Kohanim are standing. So from the place where the Kohanim's legs are set, that's the most literal translation. Take from you, from the Jordan, from the place that the Kohanim's legs are standing, set up 12 stones, and bring them with you, and place them in the lodging place where you will lodge tonight. Okay, so do something. Take 12 stones. Yes, Deborah.
Okay, we were talking about using goy words
versus
well, non-Israelites left with them, and maybe God's telling them, make sure an Israelite goes to be a spy.
Okay, but it's possible. I don't know. I'm just saying.
Yeah, that came to mind.
That's as legitimate an idea as any. And it's just interesting to me that the commentary doesn't point it out. I would think it would be interesting that it goes from Goy in verse 1 to Am in verse 2. So maybe the words are just interchangeable, but I'm just saying that usually in the Torah, Am is specifically for the people of Israel. So the commentary on the bottom of 16, the bottom right, the Lord spoke. See on chapter 3, verse 12, perhaps in the light of what is there stated, the translation should be the Lord had spoken. The first half of the verse in that case must be disjoined from the second and linked with the end of the previous chapter. And thus it was when all the tribes were clean passed over the Jordan, and the Lord had spoken, etc. So in other words, the commentary is trying to explain the chronology here, and that the break in the verse does make sense to point out that maybe something here should have been written earlier. MT, which has a hiatus in the middle of the verse. So MT, what does MT stand for? I just want to see if it says something about this in the beginning, about abbreviations. Let me just see. We have an index in the back. Oh, terms and abbreviations. MT, so on page 323 is terms and abbreviations. MT is Masoretic text. So the Masoretic text is like the original manuscript from which all other editions of the Bible are printed. Okay, so the Masoretic text is, so the Masoretes made the Masoretic text. So the Masoretes are the, in Hebrew, be the Masorah, the people of the Masorah in the 800s in Israel, who put the cantillation marks and the vowels there. Okay, so the Masoretic text, which has a hiatus in the middle of the verse, seems to indicate that a new section begins in the second half. Alternatively, the first half may be connected with verse 4. And it came to pass when all the nation were clean passed over the Jordan, then Joshua called the 12 men, etc. The intervening passage would then be in parenthesis. Okay, so just trying to figure out then the break in the verse and the order of things. It goes on, out of stood. The Hebrew is literally from the standing place of the feet of the priests. In view of the preceding notes, the rendering may be out of the place where the priest's feet shall stand. So, an altar has nothing on this. Okay, let's read 4 to 14, a big chunk. Vayikra Yehoshua el shneim ha'asar ish asher hechin mi bnei Yisrael ish echad mishabet vayomer lahem Yehoshua ivru lifnei Aron Adonai Elohechem el toch hayarden veharimu lachem ish even achat al shichmo lemispar shiftei bnei Yisrael lema'an tiyeh zot ot b'kirbechem Ki yishalun b'nechem machar lemor ma ha'avanim ha'ele lachem, va'amartem lahem, asher nichretu meimei ha'yarden mipnei Aron brit Adonai, ve'avro ba'yarden, nichretu mei ha'yarden. Ve'hayu ha'avanim ha'ele lezikaron livnei Yisrael ad olam. Vayasu chen b'nei Yisrael kasher tziva Yehoshua, vayis'u 12 avanim mitoch hayarden, kasher diber Adonai el Yehoshua, lemispar shiftei b'nei Yisrael, vaya'aviru mimachem el hamalon, vayanichum sham. U12 avanim hekim Yehoshua b'toch hayarden, tachat matzav raglei hakohanim, nosei aron habrit, vayu sham ad hayom hazeh. והכהנים נושאי הארון עומדים בתוך הירדן עד תום כל הדבר אשר ציווה אדוני את יהושע לדבר אל העם, ככל אשר ציווה משה את יהושע, וימהרו העם ויעבורו. ויהי כאשר תם כל העם לעבור, ויעבור ארון אדוני והכהנים לפני העם. ויעברו בני ראובן ובני גד וחצי שבט המנשה חמושים לפני בני ישראל, כאשר דיבר עליהם משה. 40,000 חלוצי הצבא עברו לפני אדוני למלחמה אל ערבות יריחו. ביום ההוא גידל אדוני את יהושע בעיני כל ישראל, ויראו אותו כאשר יראו את משה כל ימי חייו. Joshua called, so I'm back to verse 4 translating. Joshua called to the 12 men who were set up or had prepared from the people of Israel, one man for each tribe. And Joshua said to them, cross before the ark of God, your God, into the Jordan. And you should lift up, each man should lift up one stone on his shoulder for unto the number of tribes of the children of Israel. So one stone for representing each tribe, so that this will be a sign among you that if your children ask tomorrow, saying, what are these stones for you? Right, so this should remind us of the 4 questions that are in the Haggadah. It's that same format, right? Because we're coming up to that section in the book of Exodus in our Shabbat Torah readings, where the children ask, why are we doing this? You're supposed to answer to remember leaving Egypt. So here is another format of that. What are these stones for you? And verse 7, you say to them, to remind us how the waters of the Jordan were split before the Ark of the Covenant of God. When it crossed the Jordan waters split. And these stones should be a reminder to the children of Israel forever. And the children of Israel did all that Joshua commanded, and they took the 12 stones from the Jordan as God spoke to Joshua, representing the number of the tribes of Israel, and they brought it with them or crossed it with them to the dwelling place, and they put them there. And 12 stones Joshua set up in the Jordan, under the place where the feet of the Kohanim were, who were carrying the Ark of the Covenant, and they were there until today. So I'm understanding 2 sets of 12. I'm understanding each member of a tribe, each representative of the tribe taking a stone, crossing the Jordan with it and putting it down where they were camped. And then Joshua taking 12 other stones and putting them in the Jordan. That's how I'm understanding this. We'll see from the commentary. I think that's what's going on. Verse, yes, Barry.
I also read ahead. Alter said it's most likely two conflicting stories that they.
Okay, so we'll
that they
see.
put in.
I was going to read the altar. Okay, so yeah, so it just highlights then perhaps two different oral traditions here coming together. Verse 10, and the Kohanim carrying the ark were standing in the Jordan until all these things were concluded, these things being that which God commanded Joshua to speak to the people, as all that Moses commanded Joshua, and the people hurried and crossed. Verse 11, when all the people finished crossing, then the ark of God crossed, and the Kohanim before the in front of the people, and the people of Reuven and Gad and half the tribe of Manasseh crossed armed before the people of Israel, as Moses spoke to them. Right? He made them promise, you can stay on the other side of the Jordan, but when we go to battle in the land of Israel, you have to agree to fight with us. So here is a note saying, oh yeah, Reuven, Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh are following through on Moses' command and their word. About 40,000 were so chalutzei hatzava. I think soldiers, we just translate that as 40,000 soldiers crossed before God for war to the plains of Jericho. On that day, God raised up Joshua in the eyes of Israel, of all of Israel, and they saw him like they saw Moses all the days of his life. So this was like the first test for Joshua. He passed with flying colors, and he was seen as great in the eyes of the people. So let's look at the commentary here, beginning. So it begins on verse 5 on page 17, pass on before the ark. The context shows that the meaning is that the chosen 12 men who had crossed the Jordan with the rest of the people were to return into the bed of the river up to the place where the priests were still standing with the ark. That this may be a sign among you, the sense of history is very vivid and alive in Israel as a source of inspiration and a means of strengthening the bond between God and his people. The dedication of the firstborn to God and the observance of the Passover ritual are similarly explained. Right, we're going to get there in the next few verses that Joshua has the people do too. When your children ask, etc., this historical sense is to be made a medium for the education of the young, upon which Judaism has always laid the greatest emphasis. Just want to point out, though, of all my trips to Israel, we have never made a stop at the Jordan River to see where these 12 stones are. And I don't know of any monument that is set up. I don't know of any like ultra-Orthodox people. You know, there are tombs for Joseph, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, and Hebron. So those tombs are venerated, and those are worship sites. Those are pilgrimage sites. Why aren't the 12 stones in the Jordan River a pilgrimage site? Just a question, throwing it out. I don't know. I don't know what happened here. There's even a place where you go down by the Dead Sea where, depending on the tour guide, you'll see a pillar of salt, and they say, oh yeah, that's the one, that's Lot's wife. So you got Lot's wife remembered down by the Dead Sea. You have all these burial places remembered. You would think you'd have the 12 stones.
Are there
Remember,
are there stones there? Are they obvious?
I have no
Have you
idea.
seen have you seen pictures of them?
No, no, this isn't a thing. I think if you
Oh.
Google 12 stones, Jordan River, I don't think anything would come up. I don't know anything about this.
They, Jonah,
Yes,
they
yes.
probably don't know where the specific crossing point
I don't
is.
think it matters. I think they could have made it up and still said that this is, how do they know where the mountain is? Like the mountain that's called Jebel Musa, that is Mount Sinai. How do somebody had to say at one time, or the tradition was, oh yeah, this is the place. And somehow, okay, they said, everybody agreed at some point over the centuries. Yeah, but was that the mountain? We don't know. But there's a mountain in the Sinai that's designated as Mount Sinai. So where are the stones that are designated as the crossing place into the land of Israel? I just think this is bizarre that we don't have this as part of our tradition, right? In other words, like when the Zionist pioneers came in the 1880s, was it a thing to try to go to the Jordan River to see where we're coming back, just like our ancient ancestors came into the land of Israel? You would see it as possibly the fulfillment of the Zionist dream and the reestablishment of Jewish settlement in Israel, and then the state of Israel being established too. You would think that would be a huge, important monument. Never heard of it. Never been a place to see. And I think, school groups every year in Israel, it's a different kind of trip that you take at one point in your year. You go to Masada, you go up north, you go to different places.
Right.
No, you don't go to the Jordan to see these 12 stones. Yes, Barry.
Well, I know that Jordan is diminished now because of agriculture and
Yeah.
diversion of water, but it was a mighty river at one point. And if it was a mighty river, wouldn't the stones conceivably
But
have
it
washed
says in the verse, the 12 stones are there to this day.
to this day as of the
Okay,
date
well,
of-
when was the book of Joshua written? Which day is this talking about? How much time after these events was this written down? Still, I would say, that there's rivers were drying up in Europe, right? So lots of archaeological discoveries are found along the edges of the rivers, right? In Italy and Spain, from hundreds of years ago. They're there now to see, because the rivers, because of drought, have ebbed. So the Jordan River has ebbed. Stones are stones. So maybe they could be worn down a little bit. Like, I don't know, for some reason on my Facebook feed, I saw pictures of the stairway inside the tower, Leaning Tower of Pisa. And you see how there are grooves in each step from people walking over 500 years over those same steps. So, okay, there would be one thing to have stones grooved by the water, but I think these are big stones. These aren't little rocks that you can put in your pocket. I think these are bigger stones to set up there in the water. So I'm just saying, it's just interesting to me that these 12 stones, which are meant to be a monument, which children are going to be asking in every generation, what are these stones? So like, it's a pilgrimage site. People are supposed to be going back to visit. Oh yeah, remember when we crossed the Jordan and began our settlement of our inheritance, settling the land of Israel. So I would think it's an important thing. Yes, Barry.
So I wanted to ask a numbers question. It's estimated that 600,000 people came out of
Right.
600,000 men, or 600,000 people complete.
So 600,000 men over the age of 20. So how many
Okay.
people was it altogether? A million or so?
Right. And
Right.
and 40 years later, theoretically,
They took a census. They took a census at Mount Sinai, and then they took a census 38 years later, and still The same, around the same number.
Same number, but
So
only
that's
40,000, but only 40,000
Oh,
troops
yeah,
to fight.
40,000 of Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh. I think that's what that means. Yeah. So it's just interesting to me. Maybe Alter will say something about these stones. Yeah, well, there is commentary there. We'll get to the Alter commentary soon. Let's just finish this commentary first. So 18, page 18, the commentary in verse 9. Acting apparently on his own initiative, Joshua had another 12 stones set up in the riverbed itself, a natural proceeding to mark the place where the priests had stood with their sacred burden. So like I said, as translating this, there are 12 stones set up in the place where they were camped after they crossed. And then Joshua set up 12 stones himself in the Jordan River itself. So the commentary goes on, the memorial in Gilgal necessitated this other. The former raised questions which the latter answered. At Gilgal, this lesson in Israel's history began. At the Jordan, it was completed. When the children heard the wondrous story, they naturally asked where the crossing was made. And here was the answer, which showed them the very spot on which the feet of those who carried the ark stood. Unto this day, when this book was written, the Talmud asserts that they were still there in the generation after the destruction of the Second Temple, and 3 rabbis stood on the stones. Okay, so in the Talmud, Tractate Sota, the stones are still there, and the rabbis record standing on the stones. Okay, but again, it's not an important place like the burial place of the patriarchs and matriarchs, or the Temple Mount, where the temple's standing. Just interesting. According to all that Moses commanded Joshua, the mention of Moses is unexpected and seems out of place. Probably Moses had given Joshua certain instructions before he died in connection with the crossing of the Jordan. These were now carried out. According to a rabbinical tradition, these stones were first set up on the day of the crossing on Mount Ebal, but were immediately removed and conveyed to Gilgal. This verse would then refer to the temporary erection of the stones at Mount Ebal in accordance with Deuteronomy 27. Possibly, however, the verse does not refer to the erection of the monument, but to the crossing, and particularly to the exhortation to proceed with the conquest of Canaan. Okay, so there's another tradition, and maybe these stones ended up at Mount Ebal. Remember that in Deuteronomy, Moses said, when you get into Israel, you're going to be at these 2 mountains, Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim, to hear the recitation of the blessings and curses. So we'll see. The commentary assumes we've read the book of Joshua already. I have, but a long time ago, so I don't remember the reference to Gilgal, and I don't remember how Joshua set up the Mount Ebal, Mount Gerizim thing. So, well, we'll have to see as we keep reading in the book. Verse 11, and the priests before the people, that is, the priests left the riverbed, passed over the river, and then took their position at the head of the people. Before the children of Israel, if this is understood literally, it was a departure from the usual order as prescribed in Numbers 2. Possibly before is not to be stressed unduly, but only implies that they fulfilled their undertaking with alacrity and zeal. About 40,000, that is, men of the 2.5 tribes. Even so, there were only about 1/3 of the males of military age as enumerated in Numbers 26. The rest must have stayed behind to guard the cities and villages which they had already built, and some of them may have been unfit for military service. So in other words, if we look at the census at the end of Numbers 26 and count up Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh, we should get to plenty more than 40,000. So then What happened to the rest of them? Why did only 40,000 go? Why didn't all of them go? So they stayed back to guard the cities, and some weren't fit for fighting. And right, and then on verse 14 about how great Joshua was seen by the people, see chapter 3, verse 7. Okay, so let's see what Alter says about all this. So on page 22 in Alter, verse 9, and Joshua set up 12 stones in the middle of the Jordan. This second set of 12 stones looks redundant. There may have been a competing account of the event in which the conveyors of the traditional material felt that the more appropriate memorial was on the very spot where the feet of the priest had stood, and the redactor decided to include both versions. This would, however, be an underwater memorial scarcely visible except when the Jordan was nearly dry. But see the next comment on the question of the stone's visibility. And they have been there to this day. This is an explicitly etiological tag absent in the report about the other set of 12 stones. It leads one to wonder whether there in fact might have been a pattern of stones in the riverbed detectable from the surface around which this story was woven. Which came first, the stones or the people's putting the stones there? That's the question. But no comment from Alter about the stones themselves and not being a monument to which people were visiting. As all that Moses had charged Joshua, this clause is puzzling because Moses clearly had no role in instructing Joshua about the procedure for crossing the Jordan. The clause does not appear in the Septuagint. That's the original Greek translation of the Bible from 2,000 years ago. And one suspects a scribe inadvertently added it here because it was a set formula and akin to the concluding clause of verse 12, where the reference to Moses is appropriate. Feared him. The context makes clear that the force of the verb is not an experience of fright, but reverence, or perhaps more specifically, acceptance of his authority. After the enactment of a miracle that closely corresponds to the great miracle performed for Moses at the Sea of Reeds, Joshua's position as legitimate leader is fully confirmed.
Jonah,
Yes.
I think you've said it, and I guess it's been written, and I've read it before, that all copies of the Torah are pretty consistent.
Yes.
Except the Greek, the Septuagint, all those various, but not the later books of the Jewish Bible.
There's an accepted text for the later versions of the Bible too, but it's just not seemed as in the hierarchy of texts, the Torah is the most important.
Right, but the fact that they can say that a scribe may have added that line of Moses.
So, but there is the Masoretic text is not just of the Torah, it's of all the Jewish books of the Bible.
Right.
So that is the accepted version. It's just that, just in the course of my daily reading of Bible, Torah is the most important of all the books of the Bible. The others are important, and there is an accepted text, so that we're familiar with other books of the Bible from the Haftarah, from every Shabbat. So we know some of Jeremiah, Isaiah, Ezekiel, some of the other minor prophets, Joshua and Judges too, a part of the Haftarah, Samuel as well. So we're familiar with those books. And sometimes there's a notation there, how the word is written in the text and how it should be read out loud. So it shows that there is an accepted standard text from which all other copies have been made. All right, so there is an accepted text, and then scholars. So let me say it this way. Rabbis would care about how the words should be read, but they don't care so much about the scholarship behind it that biblical scholars are in terms of Septuagint and other copies of the text as well, or archaeological discoveries and how that helps elucidate the text, etc. So for biblical scholarship, it's important to note that the Septuagint didn't have a phrase, whereas our text does. So that's interesting literarily, but in terms of Jewish tradition, not much of an impact.
Well, I think I was really referencing more that the original 5 books, the Torah itself, there is no inconsistency from everything that I've read.
No, the Septuagint also has inconsistencies too.
It does. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there are. So that's the interesting thing about the story of the Septuagint. Here are 70 independent people sitting, forced by the Greek emperor in Egypt to write a translation, and they better all be right. They all better match up. And so they all do match up, but the interesting thing is they're matching up with differences from the text of the Torah itself. So, but I'm not a Septuagint scholar, so I can't say more about that to understand how that could be. Okay, so let's read to the end of the chapter now, 15 to 24. Vayomer Adonai El Yehoshua, I'm on page 20. Vayomer Adonai El Yehoshua lemor, Savei et haKohanim nosei Aron ha'edut, v'ya'alu min ha'yarden. Vayetzav Yehoshua et haKohanim lemor, alu min ha'yarden. Vayehi ba'alot haKohanim nosei Aron brit Adonai mitoch ha'yarden, nitku kapot raglei haKohanim el hecharava, vayashuvu mei hayarden limakomam, vayelchu kitmol shilshom al kol gidotav. Veha'am alu min hayarden be'asur lachodesh harishon, vayachanu ba Gilgal b'ksei mizrach Yericho. Here's the reference to Gilgal. V'yet shtei mesrei ha'avanim ha'ele asher lakhu min hayarden hekim Yehoshua ba Gilgal. I have to take this phone call. I'm sorry about that. Somebody from the shul and somebody who's in hospice. So, okay. So I was reading verse 20. V'et havanim ha'ele asher lakhu min hayarden hekim Yehoshua ba Gilgal. Vayomer el bnei Yisrael lemor asher yishalun bneichem machar et avotam lemor ma havanim ha'ele. V'hodatem et bneichem lemor bayabasha avar Yisrael et hayarden hazeh. Asher hovish Adonai Elohechem et mei hayarden mipneichem ad ovrechem ka'asher asa Adonai Elohechem liyam suf asher hovish mipanenu ad ovrenu. Lema'an da'at kol amei haaretz et yad Adonai ki chazakahi lema'an yiratem et Adonai Elohechem kol hayamim. And God said to Joshua, saying, command the Kohanim, carriers of the Ark of the Testimony. Just interesting that it's a different word here. It has been Aron HaBrit, the Ark of the Covenant. Now it's the Ark of the Testimony. And they should get up out of the Jordan. Joshua commanded the Kohanim, saying, get up out of the Jordan. When the Kohanim were getting up, and so the asterisk above the letter Bet tells us that it's written in the text with a Bet, but the asterisk down below in the small print says it should be read as Ka'alot. So it shouldn't be a Bet, it should be a Kaf. So that's just a Masoretic note telling us that it makes more sense to read Ka'alot. So it was when they were coming out, when the Kohanim were coming out, the carriers of the Ark of the Covenant. Okay, so it changed the word of God from the Jordan, that the soles of the feet of the Kohanim dried as soon as they got on dry land. And the waters of the Jordan returned to its place, and it went back like it was yesterday and the day before on its banks. And the people rose up from the Jordan on the 10th of the first month, and they camped in Gilgal on the eastern edge of Jericho. And the 12 stones, these 12 stones that they took from the Jordan, Joshua set up in Gilgal. And the people of Israel said, when your children ask tomorrow their fathers, what are these stones? Let your children know that on dry ground the people crossed this Jordan. That God your God dried the waters of the Jordan from before you until you crossed, as God your God did to Yam Suf, that God dried from us until we crossed. So that you know, so that all of the peoples of the earth will know that the hand of God is mighty, so that you will fear God your God forever. All right, so it's another question, like what is this that the children are asking? So the children asked the question already earlier in this chapter. Now they're asking the question again, and now they get a slightly different answer as well. That's to remind us of God, just like God did at the Red Sea, so God is doing now, and also so that all peoples of the earth will know that God's mighty hand did this. Okay, so
Jonah,
yes, Jules.
I'm confused about all these stones that are getting talked about.
All the what that's getting talked about?
Stones.
Stones, yeah, what's confusing?
What I want to find out is, are these 12 stones they took out of the Jordan the ones you're referring to from when they crossed?
Well, so there are two sets of 12 stones, apparently. There's one set that each representative of each tribe took out of the Jordan and brought to where they camped, and Joshua now, we're told, set them up at Gilgal. And there's another 12 that's in the river, and we don't hear about them again.
Okay.
So two sets of 12. Okay.
That answers my question. Thank you.
Okay. So let's look at the commentary, bottom of 20, 15 to 17. These verses obviously precede verse 11 chronologically, yet it's natural to repeat here the command to the priests to go up from the Jordan, because verse 18 tells how, when they did so, the Jordan resumed its flow. On the 10th day of the first month, Nisan, or as it was then called, Aviv, corresponding to March, April. On that day, 40 years earlier, they had taken the lamb for the Paschal sacrifice before their departure from Egypt. Rabbi Levi said, their taking the Paschal lamb in Egypt stood them in good stead at the Jordan. That is, the miracle at the Jordan was a reward for their act of faith in openly setting aside the lamb for the Passover sacrifice in the full knowledge that it might provoke the Egyptians who worship the lamb to drastic action. Rabbi Levi based his comment on the coincidence of the dates, right? So in other words, we're told in Exodus 12 when they took the lamb, and the 10th day of the month. And now the 10th, we're told it was the 10th day of the month. So the Rabbi Levi makes the connection. This is the reward. You get to cross the Jordan because you followed through on that first command of taking the lamb. Gilgal, see verse 9. The place is named Gilgal here in anticipation. The word really means a circle. See the note on the next verse. The site is supposed to be indicated by a heap of ruins called Tel Etelch, formerly known as Tel Jeljel, about 2 miles from Jericho. So in Arabic, there is a soft G sound, which is here, Jedjal. In Hebrew, there isn't a soft G sound. And Jedjal could be like Gilgal, could be the same thing, Hebrew versus Arabic. And perhaps 2 miles from Jericho, there is an archaeological site that could be the remnant of these 12 stones. Set up, possibly in the form of a circle, which is the meaning of Gilgal. You know, kind of imagine Stonehenge. Maybe that's the kind of thing here. And then on 23, before us. Though all this would happen in days to come, future generations would identify themselves with the present generation for whom the miracle had been wrought. A similar identification runs through the Haggadah, the narrative of the Exodus read in the Jewish home on the Passover Eve, where all generations are bidden to regard themselves as having been liberated from the bondage of Egypt. Right? So just the commentary is just pointing out similar language here. That ye may fear, this means either and that you may fear, and being understood, or recognition by all the peoples of the earth of God's might would intensify the fear of God among the Israelites. And let's see altar on the rest of this. On page 24, Ark of the Covenant. Here a different term, edut, witnessing, is used, but it appears to be a synonym for Brit, covenant. On the 10th of the first month, this is the month of Nisan, approximately corresponding to April. The 10th of Nisan is 4 days before the Passover festival. The eastern edge of Jericho, this would mean the edge of Jericho's territory. And these 12 stones Joshua set up at Gilgal. The name Gilgal means circle, although it is given a secondary etymology in the next episode. Yeah, we'll see chapter 5 about this. And so we may assume that the stones were set up in a circle. Gilgal was an important cultic site in the first 2 centuries of the monarchy and figures significantly in the stories of Samuel, Elijah, and Elisha. As with other sacred places in ancient Israel, it may well have been a locus of pagan worship before it was taken over by the Israelites. There is some likelihood then that the stones arrayed in a circle were originally matzevot, cultic stels, and that the story is framed to make them integral to the monotheistic narrative. All right, so Alter's idea of transforming something that has been there and making it Jewish. It's typical of all religions, taking a site that clearly was religious before and then transforming it to their own religion. So churches do this with synagogues, mosques do this with synagogues, and in either Toledo or Seville, there's a church which had been a mosque, which had been a synagogue. Okay, I don't remember which town that is in, but it's famous. And you can see in that church the remnants of the previous inhabitants. So there's some Muslim art there, and there's some Jewish stuff remaining in that place. So it's just like the Temple Mount has the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque on it. And it's a holy place because it was holy to the Jews before us, and it possibly holy to some other pagan people before we took it over too.
It is interesting that in
Yeah.
previous verses we're commanded to like not use those things, like cut
Ah,
down
right.
trees. But here which actually
Right.
kind of makes sense. I mean, the way the Israelites took the name of the pagan gods or the Canaanite
Right.
gods and morphed them with theirs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, it is interesting. Yeah. Let's read the rest of altar, page 25. Dry land. Here, Yabashah is used, the term that occurs in Exodus 14 and 15, which he dried up before us. The switch from third person dried up the waters of the Jordan before them. To first person plural reflects the operation of the commemorative ritual. It was the Israelites of Joshua's generation who experienced the miracle at the Jordan, but all Israel of every generation, beginning with everyone over 20 who was with Moses, the generation that has purportedly died out, participates in the divining moment of the parting of the Sea of Reeds, replicated at the Jordan, so that all the peoples of the earth might know the hand of the Lord. This theme is similar to the one reiterated in the narrative of the 10 plagues in Exodus. Its validity will then be confirmed in the first verse of chapter 5, which in all likelihood is the actual conclusion of this narrative unit. So that you might fear the Lord your God at all times, the repetition of so that, lema'an, inscribes a causal chain. The other nations recognize the power of the God of Israel through this great miracle, and Israel fears or reveres its God both through the direct experience of the miracle and through its confirmation in the eyes of the surrounding peoples. Okay, so let's stop here for today. Note that next Friday, I'm going to be in Rhode Island for a couple days next week, and we'll be flying home next Friday, right when class is supposed to be happening. So I'm not going to be able to lead class next Friday. So we'll see each other again 2 weeks from today. Okay? So have a good Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shalom.
Rabbi, she's going to be ready for her bat mitzvah in 12 years. You really should start teaching her Bible now. So
That's right.
she can come to the next class.
All right. I'll see what I can do. All right. Take care, everybody. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.